Rambo was innocent.
I'm warning you, boy, don't make a move. I'll blow your head off. I didn't do anything.
They pushed him too far.
Starting to dislike you a lot.
One man who'll never give up.
I didn't come here to rescue Rambo from you. I came here to rescue you from him.
Are you telling me that 200 men against your boy is a no-win situation for us?
You send that many, don't forget one thing.
What?
A good supply of body bags.
Sylvester Stallone. You have never seen him like this before. First Blood, from the best-selling novel.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1982 classic, First Blood. Now, before I get into sharing my thoughts on this fantastic film, I want to give a shout out to Nick for requesting this review, as well as reviews of the entire Rambo series. If there is a film, TV show, or topic you'd like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, First Blood is one of those films that I've always enjoyed. I've enjoyed it ever since I first saw it on VHS when I was a kid, and I continued to enjoy it as I got older. I remember getting the Rambo trilogy on DVD as a Christmas present from my parents, and I remember just watching the ever-loving hell out of those discs. I was definitely a Rambo fan, and First Blood is one that I watched quite often, and it's a film that, as I have gotten older and have watched more movies and I've really developed my strengths as a critic and also developed my knowledge base for film, I've come to appreciate First Blood on a completely different level than I did when I was a kid. I think First Blood is an amazing film. I think it's one of the best examples of a mix of drama and action, and how to do it effectively, and how to handle a difficult lead and make them not only likable, but also sympathetic, despite the actions that they are doing. Because if you think about it, John Rambo is in the wrong. Yes, you in a lot of ways are rooting for him. But on the other hand, what he's doing is against the law. So this is one of those films that I don't think really glorifies what he does. It sufficiently, I wouldn't say punishes him, but it sufficiently puts a showcase on how he is in the wrong. And I feel that there's a lot of movies like this that just glorify the violence to the point where it seems like, okay, is he supposed to be a hero? And I like the fact that in this film, John Rambo is not interpreted as a hero. He's interpreted as a man who, because of everything that he's been through in his life, winds up snapping because of one last straw and one last moment of him being treated poorly, and in a moment of weakness after dealing with a personal blow, finding out that one of the last people that he could call a friend is no longer around and is dead. It just sends him on this, it's not really a killing spree, and that's the other thing that I like about the film, is that you can have this kind of story and you can make it equally as effective without a high body count. He goes on a violent rampage, but the violence is more, it's more restricted. It's more restricted to one guy at the police precinct and to personal property. It's not really a violent rampage in the realm of a shootout or someone who goes in and just does a mass shooting. And I feel Stallone was just the perfect casting for this role of John Rambo because he does such a great job playing these everyman characters. These guys who really do feel like they're part of a downtrodden aspect of society. Despite his larger than life personality and charisma as an actor and as a person, Stallone is very down to earth, and that really comes across in a lot of ways with his films and with his performances. And I felt that his performance as John Rambo in this film is some of his best acting and some of his most genuine acting when it comes to really bearing his soul and showing vulnerability as well as strength. And speaking of strengths, this film has some really strong direction by Ted Kotcheff. And Ted Kotcheff was actually attached to this film for many, many years. In fact, he was attached to this project years prior before it was even ultimately made. Because First Blood was a project that was in development hell for decades. The book by David Morrell was a hit, and understandably, a bunch of studios were trying to make a film adaptation, and for whatever reason, the films never got made. Like, the closest that one got was there was going to be a film in the 70s, late 70s, there was going to be an adaptation, and it was going to star Brad Davis, the star of Midnight Express. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't meant to be, and the cameras never rolled, and I think the company that was bankrolling it ran out of money or something along those lines, so it was never ultimately shot. So First Blood as a film was still up in the air all the way until it finally started shooting in 81 for the 1982 release of First Blood. And there were a lot of different actors in mind, bigger names, or the kind of actors that were all over the place. I mean, Al Pacino at one point was considered, but Al Pacino wanted the film to be darker, wanted the film to feature Rambo killing more people, and the producers didn't want to do that because they wanted to handle the story differently. And there was even a different actor for Trotman that was cast. It was Kirk Douglas. He was cast as Colonel Trotman, but he had his own ideas, and he started injecting himself into the plot a little bit too much. And understandably so, the producers were like, nah, we don't really want to deal with that. And neither did Stallone, because Stallone had already been cast at this point. And Stallone was close to leaving the project, and because of what's going on with Kirk Douglas and what he wants to do with the film and how it doesn't fit with Stallone's vision, it doesn't fit with the vision of the producers or the writers or the director. In a lot of ways, it was Kirk Douglas throwing his weight around, and for the good of the film, they didn't ultimately succumb or kowtow to his demands, and they wound up finding a last-minute replacement in Richard Crenna. And Richard Crenna actually had to have his lines given to him while he's on the set because it was such last minute in terms of the casting that he had to have his lines fed to him. That's what makes his performance even more impressive. This is an iconic performance by Richard Crenna as Colonel Trotman, with those really memorable lines of dialogue. He was just another drifter that broke the law. Vagrancy, wasn't it? That's going to look real good on his gravestone in Arlington. Here lies John Rambo, winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor, survivor of countless incursions behind enemy lines, killed for vagrancy in Jerkwater, USA. Are you telling me that 200 of our men against your boys a no-win situation for us? You send that many, and don't forget one thing. What? A good supply of body bags. He just had this really great deadpan and understanding of this character. And it's impressive, considering he was such a last-minute replacement for Kirk Douglas. There were a lot of things that could have just gone completely horribly awry with this film. Stallone could have left, and if that happened, I don't think this movie would have gotten made again, and it would have just remained in development hell. And it would have been considered to be this cursed project that's never meant to be. But Stallone stayed on because Kirk Douglas ultimately left the project, and they were able to work the kinks out. And you had the whole stuff with the last minute replacement for Kirk Douglas with Richard Crenna. You have Stallone himself getting pretty seriously hurt doing a stunt in this film where he leaps off the cliff and lands on the tree. Like, that scream of pain that you hear in this movie when he does that stunt, that's real. Stallone, I think he busted some ribs, might have even bruised a spleen. He got hurt pretty bad. And on top of that, you also have other things, like there was a tragic accident on the set with one of the stuntmen. They were doing a different take with the chase while Rambo's on the motorbike and Teasel is chasing after him in the police car. Well, the initial take was going to be this more high-speed chase. And the stunt guy who was playing Teasel, who was Teasel's stunt double in that more souped-up high-speed chase, he got really hurt. There was a crash and he broke his back. Thankfully, though, he was able to recover and it was fine, but it was definitely something that was pretty scary. So there were a lot of things that were obstacles in the way of this film, but ultimately the cast and the crew overcame them and managed to finish the production and turn in one of the most memorable and well-known and well-loved films of this genre. And Ted Kotcheff, I really do feel he did a terrific job directing this film in terms of maintaining the rawness that was necessary with this kind of plot line. It was a very raw and gritty movie in a lot of ways, and I really felt that his direction really did work with that. And he just also managed to showcase the ruggedness of not only the character of John Rambo, but also his surroundings so well. And I just love the way this film is shot in terms of how he shot the sequences, and I think it was British Columbia, and how he shot the scenes at night in the forest with the lightning, and there's just a lot of really great looking shots in this film. The shots of the town at night when Rambo's going around with the machine gun and just shooting up the place. I love the way that that sequence is shot and lit and ultimately put together. And the screenplay, I thought, was a really solid take on David Morrell's novel. It's a different take, and I think that was a good thing. I don't think it was a bad thing at all that it wasn't exactly like the novel. I prefer films, if they're going to be adaptations of a novel, to be unafraid of taking chances, unafraid of standing on their own. And this is a screenplay that definitely does that, by Michael Kozol, William Sackheim, and Sylvester Stallone. And I also love the fact that the producers and everyone involved in the crew, they were willing to change things around because the initial cut of the film was different, had a different ending. They had a screening, and audiences did not like the original ending, which was closer to the novel, where Rambo kills himself. And I like the fact that the studio decided, no, we're not going to go with the original ending. We're going to do a reshoot, and we're going to have Rambo live, because the audience has become so attached to this guy. They really like this guy. And I think that's a testament to the strength of the script in terms of making him such a sympathetic figure. And I think a big part of that is due to that scene at the end, that remarkable sequence where Rambo breaks down and completely cracks and cries and really shows so much vulnerability to Troutman. And I think it's not only the writing that is so good in that sequence, but definitely Stallone's performance. And that's something that I think is more respected nowadays than it was in the past, but you still have people who make fun of it, and I don't understand that at all. Stallone, I thought, was absolutely spectacular in that scene. I think it's some of his best acting, because it really does feel so real and authentic. The emotions that he's expressing and that he's dealing with. And the script also did a great job making you hate these cops and making you not necessarily 100% support Rambo's rampage, but definitely understand why he would go as far as he did. All he wanted was something to eat. That's it. If Sheriff Teasel just put his own personal issues aside and just let Rambo get something to eat at the local diner, none of this would have ever happened. And that's another reason why this story is so good, is that it takes something so simple, which is just allowing a guy to get something to eat, and then turning it into something so big and so explosive. I think that's a dynamic that is very intriguing, and it's something that really does work quite well. And on top of that, the script just 100%, like I said, makes you hate these cops in this podunk, nowhere town, Jerkwater, USA, really abusing their rights and their ability as police officers. They straight up torture Rambo, spray him with the hose, and they're gonna shave him dry. And Rambo's a Vietnam vet, so he's dealing with PTSD and all this other stuff, and he's at a really low place in his life, even lower than a lot of the other times in his life, because he came back from Vietnam and people called him baby killer and all this vile crap. And then he goes out of his way to go to the Pacific Northwest to try to visit his friend Delmar, and then finds out that his friend Delmar is dead. He died of cancer. The cancer cut him down to nothing. And then he just wants something to eat, and so he can get some fuel so he can be on his way, alone with his thoughts, not hurting anybody, not really causing any kind of ruckus. And then here comes Sheriff Teasel, and he thinks that he's the king of the town of Hope, Washington, and he's going to lay down the law. And Rambo, understandably, is like, no, I'm not going to listen to this guy. I'm hungry. I'm going to go get something to eat. And then that turns into Rambo getting arrested, Rambo getting tortured, and then Rambo finally snapping because of all of the pressure that he's dealing with. And it just is something that is simple, but at the end of the day, so effective, because of the fact that the script and the story just does such a great job making you understand Rambo's plight and understand why he would snap the way that he does. And it's not really, I wouldn't really call First Blood an action film. It's got action elements in it. There are some nice sequences when Rambo first breaks out of the police station. I like the fisticuffs there, throws a guy through a window, gets on the motorcycle. There's a pretty decent chase there involved. And then the rest of the movie, it's like a survival film. And in some ways, it's kind of a survival horror movie. The way that it's shot at night with the lightning flashes and Rambo hiding in the dark and camouflaging himself and setting up traps and picking off these guys. And I like scenes like when he first gets Sheriff Teasel again after the whole scenario at the police station and the whole ridiculousness when he just wants something to eat, where he gets him and has the knife against his throat and has him up against a tree, and he's all like, "Don't push it. Don't push it, or I'll give you a war you won't believe." I like that. I think that's a really effective, solid scene. Very simple in terms of its dialogue as well. That's another thing. Like, this film really does show you that you can be simple in your dialogue and also be very effective. Rambo is a man of very few words, but as a result, it makes his actions speak really loudly, and louder than they might have if he was always expounding upon things, if he was always saying all this stuff, or he was giving exposition dumps and all this other sort of stuff. And then you have other action bits, like when he gets through the cave and jumps on the truck and gets the guy out of the truck, and then takes the truck and smashes it through the barrier and winds up back in Hope and takes the giant gun and just goes to town on the entire town, just pumping it full of lead and blowing up the buildings, and then going after Teasel and shooting him through the ceiling of the police station. And then it ends with an explosion of emotion. So you have the gas station exploding, you have these just insane fireballs, but then the last sequence is not an action scene. It's a really heavy emotional sequence where it's Rambo just finally letting all of his emotions go and finally admitting that things are not okay, and crying and just showing so much strength in the fact that he's willing to bare his soul like that. In a lot of ways, Rambo is a guy who probably saw a lot of really fucked up shit in the war, and as a result, it's forever changed him and the way that he looks at things and the way that he lives his life. And really all that he needs is someone to care, someone to show compassion. And I think that's the case for a lot of veterans. Just someone to show them compassion, to help them along their way, instead of telling them they don't belong, instead of calling them all kinds of slurs or names, or not letting them just get something to eat. Now, when it comes to the story, there are some aspects of the screenplay that I do feel are a little lackluster. I don't like the whole stuff with the Weekend Warriors. It really does not have the right tone. For the most part, the film is very consistent tone-wise. Starts out really somber with him going to see Delmar and then finding out that Delmar is dead, and then going to Hope. And I love how it's called Hope, because that's what it represents to Rambo. It represents hope, a new beginning possibly. And it turns into hell. And so he goes to Hope. You have the whole thing with Sheriff Teasel, doesn't want him there. He gets arrested, gets tortured. Then he goes on the run, escapes, winds up in getting shot at in the wilderness by one of Teasel's cops, the despicable Galt character. The way they wrote that character was also incredible in terms of how incredibly unlikable this guy was. I hated that guy so much. That fat fuck. When he died, I was like, good riddance. And I wasn't the only one. I'm pretty sure there are people who saw this in the theater and were cheering when he fell out of the helicopter. What a fucking asshole. And Sheriff Teasel isn't much better, but he's a different kind of bad guy. He's a bad guy that has more layers. A bad guy who seems like he's the pillar of the community, but really he's a prick who just wants things his way. And if there's something that winds up in his town that is not what he deems to be acceptable, he's going to do something about it. And I like the way that character is written too, because there's more dynamic, there's more depth to Sheriff Teasel than just your shouty, angry, stereotypical, cliched bad guy. He's a bad guy, but you can see good guy traits in him. You can see why people look up to Sheriff Teasel in that town. You can see why a lot of people are drawn to him. But you can also see why other people don't like the guy because of the genuinely ugly parts of him and parts of his personality. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. You have stuff like this where it's fairly serious, fairly well balanced in terms of its characters, in terms of the tone. Rambo's on the run. Galt dies, and then he's trying to stay one step ahead of the cops. And now the National Guard gets involved. And then it's played like it's a joke. And I know Stallone has mentioned the Keystone Cops. I actually think that's a good reference. That's a good example. Because it really does feel kind of like that. They're way out of place to me. I don't understand why they went with that approach. Is it possible that there might be guys that do act like that? Who are weekend warriors and members of the National Guard? Absolutely. But it just doesn't fit in this film. And then also, that whole sequence is not the best for me because of how, not only how the Weekend Warrior stuff is handled, and it's just too light-hearted in terms of its tone that doesn't really mesh with everything else, but I think the stuff in the caves goes on for way too long. I really love the way it's shot. I think Ted Kotcheff did a really good job shooting those scenes, but I don't like how long that bit is. It's a little slow, so I would have trimmed some things down a little bit. It does lead to that great iconic moment, that great line where Trotman's calling for Rambo as if he's still out there on a mission. And Rambo responds, and you have that great line where Rambo says, "They drew first blood, not me." And I don't think I did that justice, but it's an iconic line, and that's one of the best instances of a character in a film saying the title of a movie that actually fits and doesn't feel like it's out of place. But regardless, yeah, cool line, cool scene, but that was a little bit too long in the tooth for me. But other than those two things, I think the script is excellent. I think it's a great example of less is more, in terms of the fact that there really isn't much of a body count. There's only one guy who dies, and how you can have explosions of fire, and then you can also have explosions of emotion, and have both of them really have the same impact. And you can't talk about First Blood without mentioning and praising Jerry Goldsmith's score for the film. In a lot of ways, Goldsmith's score for First Blood is the heart of this movie and the heart of John Rambo. And it's such a tragic but yet hopeful score at the same time. It really does evoke a lot of sad emotions and somber feelings, but then there's also a sentimentality to it, and there's also moments where it seems like there might be light at the end of the tunnel, despite how long the road is. And on top of that, when it comes to action scenes and moments of thrills, it's just such a really impressive score in terms of the drums and all the instrumentation and just how it really gets your blood pumping. And the cinematography by Andrew Laszlo is also amazing in its own right. Really gorgeous, breathtaking shots of the British Columbia forests and woodlands and cliffs and just a really nice looking film despite its low budget, at least for the time. And it's well edited by Joan Chapman as well. I mean, from a technical perspective, everything about this film really does work. From the direction to the editing to the cinematography to the sound design to the stunt work by the cast and crew to the makeup effects by Michael Westmore, which were very real looking and very brutal. There wasn't a lot of it, but what was there looked like it was real. It looked like when Stallone's character Rambo cut his arm up when he hit that tree, it looked like he actually did cut his arm up and he was sewing it up for real. And it's just one of those movies that is iconic. It's a classic for a reason, and it will continue to stand the test of time. I mean, I even love the sappy song at the end by Dan Hill, which is a take on the main theme of the film by Jerry Goldsmith, with lyrics added onto it. It's in a lot of ways it reminds me of a folk song, and I've always liked that song, and I don't think it's corny or anything like that. This is a film to me that is just really a masterwork when it comes to an action drama or a dramatic action film with thriller aspects of it, because there's a lot of thriller aspects with Rambo in the woods going after guys, using traps and so on and so forth. And of course the cast. I mean, why not save the cast for last year? Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo. Another role that he was born to play. Just the kind of role that Stallone personifies so well. Someone who is sympathetic and is able to show weakness, but at the same time is very strong and able to hold their own against a lot of different elements and a lot of different obstacles. Richard Crenna as Troutman, Brian Dennehy, may he rest in peace, as Teasel. He really did a great job working with all of these different aspects of his character and pulled them both off brilliantly. You liked the guy, but then you hated the guy. There was a lot of things going on that made you very conflicted with this character. And that was the entire intent, and Dennehy pulled it off. And other guys, I mean, Jack Starrett as Galt. I mean, you could not have done a better job playing a asshole cop that you wanted to see Rambo beat up, kick his ass, shoot him in between the eyes, take his knife and shove it where the sun don't shine. Great villain. And the rest of the cast is fine too. I mean, you got Chris Mulkey in an early role as one of the deputies. David Caruso is one of the deputies as well. But the film in a lot of ways is a three-person show. It's Sylvester Stallone, it's Richard Crenna, and it's Brian Dennehy for a good majority of the running time. And all three of those actors are amazing in these roles. So I don't really know what to say about First Blood, except if you haven't seen this one, definitely check it out. It's a classic. I will say this about this cover art. This is terrible. What is this Photoshop bullshit? Why can't you just use the original poster? This is clearly not Stallone from First Blood. This is Stallone, I think, from Rambo 3 or First Blood Part 2. What is it? What? I don't... And also, these films really don't have the best features. I would love to see new interviews with Stallone and whatever cast and crew members are still around, because the ones that we do have here are very meh. But if you have a 4K player, it's a really nice looking transfer, so it definitely is worth upgrading in that regard. But anyway, that's my thoughts on First Blood, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.